You know, if you watch shows nowadays, some of you may, particularly if you're streaming, usually if there are episodic shows, there'll be a recap, right? What happened last time, because sometimes you don't always remember all the details. So I'll kind of do a recap here of what we talked about in the Bible study. And I mentioned that in the Declaration of Independence of the United States, Thomas Jefferson had talked about certain rights, unalienable rights, that all men have: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so we talked about the meaning of happiness, and I was talking with someone after the Bible study who pointed out that in the sense that Jefferson meant the word, the idea of being a virtuous individual, living the right way of life, that happiness is a byproduct of that as well. That the happiness that we want to experience is produced by doing the right things. You know, if you do the right things, then you will be a happy person. Not necessarily happy in the sense of just laughing and giggling all the time, although the example that Mr. McIver mentioned, the gentleman who was happy because it was raining, that's certainly an example of that. As I was getting ready for this, I do have lots of pages here, but don't worry, I don't plan to read from all of them. I just selected a few. But as I was preparing for this, I was thinking about a couple of songs. Now, I probably will date myself and show how limited my knowledge of music, popular music, is. You know, years ago, one of my daughters, said to me, Dad, I know you meant well, but basically you flunked the area of teaching me about music. She said, because I'm with my friends, and they know all about music, the performers, the singers, but me, she said, I felt like an ignoramus because you flunked. You didn't. So I confessed that was one of my flaws, I'm sure more than one. But I do remember, and maybe some of you do, because I see a few of you who perhaps were around at the time, but a performer by the name of Bobby McFerrin. Anybody remember him, Bobby McFerrin? Yes, I see some people nodding. And he came out with a song a long time ago called Don't Worry, Be Happy. You remember that? So here's a little song I wrote. You might want to sing it note for note. Don't worry, be happy. I think, Neil, you could do that for special music sometime, right? Now, that would have been a good one. In every life, we have some trouble, but when you worry, you make it double. So don't worry, be happy. How many of you remember that? Is that okay? Some of you older folks. All right. Anyway, he did that. He did it a cappella. He performed all the sounds. Very amazing musician, very, very talented. And then some years ago now, moving fast forward, I guess a couple of decades, we had Pharrell Williams, or Pharrell. Anybody heard of him? Pharrell Williams? Okay, yes. Now that's perhaps a little bit younger, although Pharrell is 50, so he's not a spring chicken anymore. But he had a song, a big hit called Happy. It's a lively tune. In fact, I was thinking of showing that video, and I was asking my daughter and my wife last night, well, what do you guys think? And they said, well, it's a little long. It's about 4 minutes. And, I don't know, it's a very, very conservative group in there, and they might think you're a little bit scandalous with this. So I said, yeah, you don't want them to kick you out. So anyway, if you're interested, it's available on YouTube. And, you find yourself, toe-tapping a little tune and so on. I was also this last week down in Beaumont. I hadn't been there before. It's a nice little town. Well, I guess it's not so little, it's bigger than Tyler, but I was there at a trial. And it went on the whole week, and at the very end, of course, the jury has to render its verdict. And we're all kind of, speculating what the verdict might be. And I'll be honest, I was very sympathetic toward the defendant. I really felt that the defendant, in my view, was innocent of the charge that was on the indictment. Anyway, the jury comes in, and you don't know what the verdict is. The judge doesn't know, and then they present the verdict to the judge. The judge reads it and then asks the court secretary to read the verdict. One of the things, of course, is they have to make sure that it was a unanimous verdict. So we're all waiting there. What is it going to be? And the jury verdict was not guilty. And you can imagine how happy the defendant was and his defense attorney. And, they both embraced, they're both in tears, but these were tears of joy, tears of happiness. And Frank, I'll tell you, I got caught up in that. I was there too, and I found myself just, the emotion of the moment. So really, really, and I would say, particularly, I'm sure, on the defendant's part, a real deep happiness, a deep satisfaction that the thing he'd been accused of doing, the jury had realized, no, he had not done that. He was not guilty. He had some friends who did bad things, but he himself had not done that. So it was very, very, as I say, moving, and it kind of reinforced for me this theme that I wanted to talk about. Now, in the first part, I mentioned that in the Old Testament, the word Asher means happy, but it also is translated as blessed, and that's why Mr. Cartwright played somewhat. Blessed and happy is the man who never walks astray, or happy is the man who never walks astray. And there were a couple of other scriptures I think I'd omitted to highlight in the Bible study, but I'll just mention them now. One of them is in 1 Kings 10 and in verse 8. And in 1 Kings 10, the Queen of Sheba comes to visit Solomon. And she's heard all about Solomon and his wisdom and how successful he was as a king and so on. And so she had to come see for herself. Is this really true? Is this really happening? And after she sees everything for herself, she concludes, it's even better than I heard. And her comment is in verse 8, how blessed are your men, the people who work for you, how blessed they are. To be in your presence, to be able to hear your wisdom day after day. And that's the same word, Asher, how happy they are. These guys must be happy to just go to work every day and be around you because they hear your words every day. So that was one use that I hadn't referred to earlier. And then I guess you could just jot down Psalm 106, verse 3. I had meant to read that. But again, those that keep justice, keep judgment, those who do the right thing are truly happy. They're truly blessed. So we see that equation in the Old Testament between Asher, meaning happiness, as well as blessing or being blessed. Well, in the New Testament also, we see something that is very much a parallel to what we see in the Old Testament. The New Testament, of course, is in Greek, and so the word in Greek that means essentially the same thing as the word Asher in Hebrew is the word Makarios. Makarios. Some of you may remember years ago, I think it was Cyprus, there was an archbishop, Makarios, the Greek Orthodox Church. They have sometimes the archbishop or the leader in that church will select a name, a special name. For example, in the Roman Catholic Church, the Pope selects a name. When he gets elected Pope, he selects a name. It's like a king. A king doesn't have to use his birth name. In England, for example, we have King Charles III right now. But he could have selected a different name if he'd wanted to. He didn't have to use Charles. He chose to use Charles. But he could have selected Edward, or Richard or something else if he'd wanted to. Or Neil, could have been King Neil I. The current Pope of Roman Catholic Church, his birth name is Jorge. He was born in Argentina, George. He didn't choose to be called Pope George. He selected the name Francis, so he's known as Pope Francis. Well, in the Greek Orthodox Church, the same thing happens. You can have your birth name, but then once you become a leading figure, such as an archbishop, you can select a name. And so a name that seemed to be popular for a while in there was the name Makarios, Archbishop Makarios. I remember that. I guess I was a kid when I'd hear that name, and found out later that the word Makarios means happy. It's the same thing as Asher. It means blessed, happy or blessed. And that occurs, I think if I can find my notes, in the New Testament. You see it translated as blessed or blessed 43 times. 43 times in the New Testament. And then happy as 6 times. But again, it means both blessed and happy. Blessed, I think we even sing that sometimes, so blessed and happy. It's reinforcing the same meaning. So let us go see where that occurs primarily. You already know if you were paying attention to the scripture reading. So let's go to Matthew 5. Matthew 5. Now I will say something that will make most of you happy. This should be short. This should be short. But let's go to Matthew 5, the Sermon on the Mount. And this is Jesus, and of course this is, you can see the parallel account in the book of Luke, but we'll just stick with the book of Matthew. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up a mountain and there sat down, and when his disciples had gathered round him, he began to address them, and this is the teaching he gave. And he starts off in verse 3, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, the kingdom of heaven is theirs." And you know, we've heard the Beatitudes so many times, for so long. It's something like, because they're so familiar, sometimes they lose some of their impact or meaning. But tie this in with what I was talking about the first part at 2 o'clock, when I talked about the pursuit of happiness. When Jefferson talked about that, he's talking about the pursuit of happiness as being universal, not just limited to Americans, as being universal. So if you are trying to pursue happiness, think about pursuing these qualities here, starting in verse 3, because this is the word Makarios, which means happy. And some translations of this section will also say happy. So happy are the poor in spirit. And generally most commentators understand this to mean someone who is truly humble, humility. It doesn't mean that you're lacking in spirit, but someone who is truly humble. So if you want to be happy in life, you can start out by being humble. So, so the antithesis of that would be filled with pride. So if you're filled with pride, what is that likely to lead to? Happiness? No, not really. Now, you can be prideful and boastful, and yes, in some contexts, you may be able to get the reaction from people who say, "Oh, how wonderful you are." They flatter you, they tell you how great you are, but does that produce genuine, that true, solid happiness that we were talking about earlier? I don't think so. So blessed or happy are the poor in spirit, the kingdom of heaven is theirs. So they will inherit that kingdom. And of course, if you inherit a kingdom, you are the heirs to the king. You're exalted. Your position there will be an exalted one. Verse 4, "Blessed are the sorrowful, they shall find consolation." Again, happy. That seems to be a paradox, doesn't it? Sorrowful, and I'm happy when I'm sorrowful. Well, what are you sorrowful about? What is it that is creating that sorrow for you? Now, is it sorrow because you didn't get your way in something? No, clearly not. But there are other scriptures that tell us that we are sorrowful when we look at the state of the world around us. Individually, we may have personal sorrows in our lives. Everybody has trials, tribulations. A number of people, as we know from the prayer list, who have health challenges. We have people die. And of course, all of those things produce sorrow. I'm not trying to diminish that in any way, but when you look around at the world and you see wars, conflicts, around the world which create enormous sorrow. And it's not just the ones that are heavily publicized. There are wars going on in other parts of the world that are not publicized, that we don't see on the news, on our TV screens, but that are creating just as much sorrow, if not more. And some of the things that occur in wars are horrific. And we don't even want to hear about them. They're so bad. And so we're sorrowful about that. And then, even in this country, I was mentioning to you about being at a trial. Now, this trial had nothing to do with this particular issue, but we did, during that week I was there in Beaumont, we did talk about human trafficking. The trafficking of people, particularly women and even children. There are horrible things that go on, and of course we all cry out for God's kingdom to come, but we will find consolation. If we are truly sorrowful about that and asking God to intervene, then that's going to, be a source of, ultimately, a source of deep, solid happiness, because those problems will be eliminated. We will find consolation. In verse 5, blessed are the gentle, happy are the gentle. They shall have the earth for their possession. This is not a concept that a lot of people really adhere to. They think, well, if you want to get in life, you want to get ahead, what do you have to do? Well, sharpen your elbows, push people aside. You're not only assertive, you're aggressive. Because that's the only way to get what you want or what you need to have, and so on. You have to demand what is yours. And yet here Jesus says you're going to be happy if you are gentle. We dismiss that. That doesn't seem to compute. And I guess what I'm trying to convey is that the way to happiness runs counter to so many of the ideas that are, I guess, common out there, that maybe some of us share, when we think about seeking happiness, pursuing happiness, being happy. It's a paradox. Blessed, happy are the gentle, they shall have the earth for their possession. And that is, of course, when Jesus returns. Verse 6, blessed are those who hunger and thirst to see right prevail. What we want to see is true righteousness, true justice. We don't want to see oppression anywhere. Again, when we look around at the world, in the first part at 2 o'clock, I talked about an example of a country where oppression and injustice prevailed. And we individually perhaps cannot change those things. We can certainly hunger and thirst to see those things changed and maybe do what we can. But if we truly seek that, then we are going to be happy because we shall be satisfied. Verse 7, blessed are those who show mercy. Mercy shall be shown to them. So you extend mercy to people, and then mercy shall be shown to you. We were discussing this subject. We had a situation this week, some of the people I was with, where something hadn't been done right. This had to do with the hotel, and the individual was reacting by saying, well, you know what? They didn't do it right. We need to maybe put a post in social media. Just really call them out on this. To show people how they're not doing what they should be doing, and then put that out there. Maybe it goes viral, and then nobody will want to do business with this organization anymore. And as I was listening to that, it reminded me of something that had occurred to me years earlier, and I shared this with them. And I said one time when I was traveling, this again was in another country, different country from the first one. All right, and I was staying at a really nice hotel in town, and had gone down for breakfast with the people I was traveling with. And, we ordered a nice breakfast. Of course, at breakfast time, you're hungry, correct? You want that breakfast to be served, reasonably soon after you put in your order. But we waited, and we waited, and we waited. And finally, breakfast shows up. The breakfast was fine, and, everybody's happy. So when we get the bill, I wrote on the check, I signed it, paid for it, but I wrote on the bill, everything was good, but it was very slow. Could you do something about that? This was so slow. And left, went on my way, did whatever I was doing. Then later, late that afternoon, I'm back at the hotel, and I hear a knock on the door. I wonder, well, who can that be? I go to the door, and it's the young lady, the waitress, the server from the morning, from the breakfast. She's knocking on my door. And I could see she was upset. And she said, well, what you wrote this morning means they're going to fire me. I'm being fired. And this was a country where, again, I was telling you how the other one, jobs were hard to get. Again, this was very, very hard to get, and she had, children and others to support. And how do you think I felt? Yeah, so I said to her, you feel bad? How do you think I feel? No, I did not say that. I felt terrible. I felt terrible. I went down, talked to the manager there, and I said, look, this was not my intention to get anybody fired. I did not, please do not fire her. Because she had explained to me, I took your order and I gave it to the kitchen. I had to wait till the kitchen had your order ready. She wasn't holding on to the food waiting and saying, I won't serve them. She was doing her job. She was doing the best she could. And then, as soon as it was ready, then she brought, and I don't remember if there were a lot of other people in the restaurant or not, but I did my best to intercede to ensure that she did not lose her job. Frankly, I don't know what happened. I wish and I hope that it turned out well for her. But again, it kind of reminds me, and that's why I was thinking, if you post something on social media and you're calling people out on something, maybe you want to think twice. Was it really deliberate malice that was shown, or was it maybe, we all make mistakes. We're all human. We're all fallible. Do we extend a little bit of mercy, or maybe a lot of mercy, in the cases that are necessary? So I try to remember that, because I certainly have received much mercy from many people from many sources of the year. But we're going to be happy if we extend mercy to others. We might be sitting here listening to, hey, on the list of boring speakers, he is number one. But extend mercy. Say, hey, well, I wouldn't probably want to go up there and speak, so maybe I should extend some mercy to him. He's willing to get up there and whatever, so I'll show him a little bit of mercy. And I'm not referring to myself, of course. Number 8, verse 8. Blessed are those whose hearts are pure, they shall see God. So again, if you're striving to make your heart pure, then that is going to, because God does not want to be around sin or evil or impurity, but that will make you happy. And, frankly, that's true of us, and I know some individuals who don't particularly enjoy watching a lot of TV or movies because, sadly, so much of it is not pure. And yet when you do see something that is wholesome, don't you feel better for it? Don't you feel, yeah, that was good. I enjoyed that. That was a good experience. And the others, sometimes you feel very uncomfortable and don't really want to see them. Verse 9, blessed, happy are the peacemakers. They shall be God's children. And that is, I think, one of the verses that really should have a powerful impact on all of us. Blessed are the peacemakers. When I think of sharing information about other people, what I like to do. If I know something about somebody else, hey, that somebody said something. We share the things that divide rather than the things that unite and make for peace. But we are happy. And I'll tell you, it truly makes me happy when I see people be happy because of something positive that I was able to share from somebody else. That truly is a blessing to me too. Blessed are those, verse 10, who are persecuted in the cause of right. The kingdom of heaven is theirs. So if you're being persecuted for righteousness, not persecuted because of your political opinions, we're talking about righteousness, or for something you did that you shouldn't have done, but this is being persecuted for right, then we can be truly happy. Verse 11, blessed are you when you suffer insults and persecution and calumnies of every kind for my sake. Exult and be glad, for you have a rich reward in heaven. In the same way they persecuted the prophets before you. So this whole section is a recipe for happiness. You want to pursue happiness? This is what you do. Makarios. You pursue all of these things, and then you will be truly happy. As I said, Makarios is blessed and happy. It's the same thing. It's the same word. You will be truly blessed if you pursue these qualities. And Matthew 16, let me just move ahead to that chapter. Matthew 16, we see where Jesus asks Peter about who he says he is, who he thinks he is. He'd asked in verse 13 of Matthew 16, Jesus asked his disciples, who do people say that the Son of Man is? Well, they had different opinions. Some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets. And you, verse 15, who do you say I am? Simon Peter answered in verse 16, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And Jesus said, Simon, son of Jonah, you are, this translation says, favored indeed. You are Makarios. You are happy. You are blessed. Because you didn't learn that from any human being. It was revealed to you by my heavenly Father. So when God gives you understanding, and we hopefully we are here because God has opened our minds, has given us some understanding. There are a lot of things we still don't understand, but many things we do. And so if God has opened our minds to see and understand these things, then we are truly blessed. This is that true and solid happiness that we can enjoy, that we can revel in, and that Simon Peter had on this occasion when he revealed who Jesus truly was. He understood that because God had opened his mind to understand that. And so the other section of the New Testament, Matthew and Luke with the Beatitudes use the word Makarios several times. And then the book of Revelation has several references to the same blessed or Makarios or happy. Just want to read a couple of these, starting in Revelation 1 and verse 3. Again, your translation may say blessed for verse 3. Mine happens to say happy. Happy is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy, and happy those who listen, if they take to heart what is here written, for the time of fulfillment is near. So you read this prophecy, you read Revelation. Well, of course, if you read the whole Bible, you are blessed. You are happy, and not only if you read it, but if you take it to heart, if you apply it. That is going to be the source of happiness for you. And then closing the book in chapter 22, Revelation 22. So the beginning of the book, and then at the end of the book, chapter 22 and verse 7. Remember, I am coming soon. Happy is the man who takes to heart the words of prophecy contained in this book. And not just the book of Revelation, but the whole book, or books of the Bible, if you will. So if we take the words that God has inspired to be recorded for us, if we take them to heart, we read them, and we apply them, then we are truly happy. That pursuit of happiness is being accomplished by doing that. That is what is going to make us truly, profoundly happy. So, even though Jefferson probably didn't intend it quite the way I've presented it today. I think that for us, as Christians, and particularly perhaps as Americans, we should look at the pursuit of happiness as the pursuit of asher, as we read in the Old Testament, or makarios, as we read in the New Testament. Let's go for our final scripture to John chapter 13. John 13, a couple of final scriptures there. John 13, and of course this begins the section of what Jesus taught before he was taken prisoner and then beaten and crucified. That my Bible calls them farewell discourses. And in John 13, we read about how Jesus washes his disciples' feet. You know, they share a meal, Passover meal, and then Jesus gets up and gets a towel, gets some water, and starts washing everybody's feet. And you know how Peter protests, and, you know, you're not going to do my feet. And, of course, Jesus says, no, I have to do this. And, you know, I'm setting an example for you. Now, I think we all know this, and I'm sure we'll rehearse it again in a few months' time when we follow this practice. But the washing of a traveler's feet was usually considered a very lowly job. Now, you did it if you had somebody over to your house, but if you were a person of any means whatsoever, you had a servant who would do that. And it's usually the servant at the bottom of the you know, the ranking of servants, the lowest job. It's the job nobody wants. It's kind of like, okay, hey, which of you want to do the foot washing for guests? And no, nobody here. Well, who's the lowest ranking servant here? You are? Okay, it's your job. So it's the job nobody wanted, because let's face it, I mean, you know, feet can stink, right? And feet can be, I don't know, feet can be ugly. Yeah, it's not the job that everybody's aching to do. It's a job that we'd rather just leave somebody else to do. And so here Jesus is doing this lowly, menial job for his disciples for a reason. Not because they were smelly feet, you know, particularly dirty, but to teach them a lesson. And in verse 12 here of John 13, when he'd finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes, returned to his place, and says, do you understand what I've done? And now you call me, you know, words that suggest that I'm the boss. You say, okay, teacher, or Lord, or as I say, boss might be the sense of that. And yes, that's what I am. I am teacher, I am Lord, absolutely. So now, understand this. I am your Lord and your teacher, and yet I have done this humble task of washing your feet. All of you, for all of you. And I want you to do the same for one another. I've set an example for you to do as I have done to you. Because a servant is not greater than the master. You know, a messenger isn't greater than the one who sent me. Verse 17, now that you know these things, you will be makarios. You will be blessed. You will be happy if you do them. What's going to make you happy? Just washing people's feet? No. What's the attitude behind that? You know, we read in Matthew 5, the humble, the one who's poor in spirit, the one who recognizes and acknowledges, no, I'm here to serve my fellow brethren. And if that entails some menial tasks, great. That's what I'm here for. Because if I do these things, I will be happy. And at the very end of this chapter of John 13, Jesus says in verse 34, a new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you. And what was one example of this love? Just a few verses earlier, I washed your feet. So as I have loved you, so you must love one another. And this is the way everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another, and that you're willing to wash one another's feet. You're willing to serve one another. You never have the attitude, well, I'm too good for that, or I'm too important for that, or whatever. And again, verse 17, you know these things, you will be happy. You will be truly happy. You will be truly blessed if you do these things. And so, Jesus is clearly showing that Christian happiness and Christian unity come from loving and doing good to others and to one another. And if we know these things, and we do know these things, we will be happy not just for a moment or for a brief, ephemeral period, but we will be eternally, permanently happy if we do them. Because we will not only have pursued happiness, we will have made it an integral part of our lives.